Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making another all dies, no stamps card using the Darling Daffodils from Lawn Fawn. So I've pulled out some scraps of colored cardstock from my stash, and the colors that I'm using are Sticky Note, Fake Tan, Cilantro, and then just plain white, all from Lawn Fawn. So I'm laying out the various elements that I want to die cut from each of the shades, and also the little centers from the white parts, and then I'm going to run these all through my die cutting machine. I also wanted to create some forget-me-nots using the tiny flower from Zesty Lemon, which I will die cut from some Moonstone cardstock. And then I'll do the middle part using the sticky note. And then the centers I'm going to use from the Darling Daffodils for these as well, out of more white cardstock. So now I'm ready to start adding in some color. I'm going to start with all of my yellow pieces, and I'm going to blend on some Distress Oxide inks on the edges, starting with some squeezed lemonade. The sticky note is pretty pale, so I wanted to gradually build up the color on the edges, starting with this lighter shade of yellow. So I'm just working my way across all 4 different die cuts, and then I'll do the rest of them off screen. I just wanted to show you one of each. And then I'm going to move on to some mustard seed, and I'll bring that in on the very edges just to deepen those up even further. I think adding this little extra color to the edges just really brings these die cuts to life. Then I'm moving on to my centers, which were die cut with the Fake Tan. And first I'm adding on some carved pumpkin, although you can't really see it that well on the Fake Tan, so I probably could have skipped the carved pumpkin. But I'm also going to add in some crackling campfire to deepen those up. And then for the green bits, I'm starting with mowed lawn. I didn't bother with the round pieces on the stems because that's just where you glue your flowers to, so it was going to be covered up anyway. But I am going to darken up the mowed lawn with some lucky clover. So I'll add a little bit of that as well and just kind of let that blend into the mowed lawn that's already there. And then for the forget-me-nots, I'm going to bring in some Stormy Sky just to deepen up those edges right at the very tips. Just trying to be gentle with them so I don't bend those little delicate petals. So once I'm done with these, I'm going to start assembling some of my flowers, and again I'll do like one of each design for you on screen, and then any extras I'll just do off screen to save you some time. But first I'm going to do a full open daffodil, so I'm just taking my glue tube and adding a little dot of that to the center of the green stem, and then adding on my petals. Then I'll take the orange piece and I'm going to add that as well. I did kind of bend up the edges a little bit just to give it some extra dimension. And I'm going to do the same with the larger yellow center, which goes to the Darling Daffodils. The smaller ones in there are for the Zesty Lemon, which I'll use for the forget-me-nots. But I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to take one of the little white centers and place that in the middle of the yellow piece. And then I'll just set that aside to dry. Next I'm going to make one that is kind of open from the side. So I'll take another stem, and this time I'm going to be using the petals that are all separate. So I'll just keep adding on a little dab of glue and then sticking the petals on. And once I have 3 or 4 petals, kind of just depending on the look that I'm going for, I'll take the little round center. I think on some of them I even did 5, but I didn't end up using all of them on this card. So I did decide to do 4 on this one just to make it a little bit more even, and then adjusted the petals how I wanted them to look. And then I'll take the orange center that's kind of facing sideways and add that on top as well. Next I'm going to do a daffodil that's just budding and you don't see the center yet. So this time I'm just going to take 3 of the petals and place them one after another, always making sure to add a little extra glue between each petal so everything is really well secured. And then there is like a little green half circle that is kind of the base where the flowers are attached to the stem. So I'll add that over top and just make sure it's on there nice and tight, and then I can set that aside to dry as well. For the forget-me-nots, I'm going to take one of the blue flowers and I will add a small yellow centerpiece to that. And then on that, I'm going to take one of the white circles from the Darling Daffodils. And they just look so cute and dainty. So now that my flowers are assembled, I'm going to grab some pattern paper from the What's Sewing On 6x6 pad. I'm going to take out these two patterns here that have the yellow floral and the yellow stitched arch. And then I die cut the yellow arch piece with the largest of the large stitch rectangle stackables. And I'm going to glue that to a piece of white cardstock that I cut down to match, just so I can give it a bit more stability, because I want to make a panel that will be raised up and have a window die cut out of the center. I'm going to use the Secret Garden window. I'm going to use the piece that just has the little dotted detail around the edges. So I'm just lining that up in the center, and then I'm going to hold it in place with a bit of Post-it tape. And I'll run that through my die cutting machine. And I can save that centerpiece for another card in the future, but for this one I'm going to use the outer edge. And then I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm taking a piece of Blue Jay cardstock and prepping that with a Rabbit Hole Designs powder tool. And then I'm going to stamp up a sentiment from Magic Messages using Versamark ink. And I'm going to stamp that down twice and just press it down gently to make sure I get a full impression. And then I will coat that in some white embossing powder. I keep mine in this big tub, but it is the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder, which I really love. I think it works fantastic and is really detailed. So I'm going to get my heat tool heated up off to the side for about a minute, and then I'll bring it to the embossing powder to melt that down until it's all white and shiny. And then I will trim that out using the die from the Magic Messages stamp set as well. Then I'll pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using more sticky note cardstock, and I'm going to grab a image and a sentiment from the garden before and afters, and I'll stamp that down using sunflower ink on the inside of my card. So I guess there are a few stamps on this card, but they're basically only sentiments except for this one floral image on the inside, which I just couldn't resist adding. It's always nice to have something on the inside that ties to the outside of the card, I feel like. So I stamped that down a few times to make sure it was nice and bold. Since this ink does dry back a bit, I wanted to make sure it was still visible in the end card. And then the floral print I just trimmed down to be slightly smaller than my card front, and I'm going to glue that onto the card base. So you won't end up seeing much of this in the final card once I get all of my florals on there, but I think it's nice to have in the background just in case a little bit of it shows. I've added some foam tape to the edges of my window frame, so I'm going to line that up on the front of the card, make sure it's on there nice and straight, and then I'll press that down into place and bring in my little florals. So I'm going to just kind of figure out where I want these to go, kind of lay them out and see what I want to use and where and how many of everything. At first I thought I might use 2 of these full daffodils, but that ended up being a little bit too much on the card. I wanted more variety, so I decided to use the sideways version and then the just budding version. So I'm just going to play with those a little bit until I get the exact placement of what I want. And yeah, it's kind of like arranging flowers, which is always fun for me. I used to have a job as a floral designer in a craft store years ago, so it's kind of bringing me back to those days a little bit. Once I'm happy with where they are, I'm going to add a little piece of foam tape behind the florals to give them some extra dimension, and that way they'll all be on the same level since part of the petals overlaps the frame, which is also popped up with the foam tape. So everything will all be nice and level there. So I'm just figuring out this last daffodil, and I wanted to make it a little bit shorter, so I trimmed the stem down a little bit, and then I'll add a piece of foam tape behind that one as well. So once I'm happy with the daffodils, I'm going to start bringing in some of these long skinny leaves and just figuring out where I want those to go. I'm going to add some liquid glue to the base of each of those leaves and then just tuck them in and let that kind of anchor them down. And then the fact that they're overlapping the frame is going to lift them up a bit and give them some dimension without me having to cut down a bunch of pieces of skinny foam tape. So I'm just kind of sticking them here and there, overlapping some of the daffodils in certain places, making sure that it looks nice and full and natural. So I'm just angling them in different directions. I'm going to place another one over on the right hand side for balance, just to even things out. And then I also wanted to add in a few more at the top, but before I get to those, I wanted to add my sentiment. So I'm going to take another piece of foam tape and just place it in that bottom right corner to help support the places that will not be overlapping the frame. And then I'll add some liquid glue as well and just press that down into place. This is actually going to be my grandma's birthday card. She's turning 90 years old this weekend, so this is the card that I'm going to take to her birthday party, so I hope she likes it. I'm going to add my last few little leaves in here. I'm going to add this cluster of 2 over on the left-hand side, and then I've got one more single one that I'll add at the top right, just to fill in that empty space there. And then I'm going to move on to my forget-me-nots. And for those, I'm going to kind of press them into my palm to give the petals a little bit of dimension. And then I'm going to add them here and there in clusters of 2 or 3, just however I think they look good. And I wanted to include those just because, well, first of all, I love forget-me-nots. I think they're such a beautiful little delicate flower, and also yellow and blue and orange. It's all like a natural color combination. But also just because of it being my grandma's birthday card, I thought it would be something special to add just to let her know, that I think she's an unforgettable, amazing woman. So yeah, it's just like a little subtle detail in there that I thought would make this card extra special. So I'm going to just finish adding in a few more of these flowers. I'm not going to use them all. I didn't know how many I was going to need, so I just made extra just in case, but the card was starting to get a little bit full, so I didn't want to overdo it. Sometimes I can tend to do that, just add a few more than is necessary. So I started to add one more. I was looking to see if I wanted to place that anywhere, maybe at the top right or the lower left, but I decided that it looked pretty good as it was, and I didn't want to, sometimes less is more, so I'm going to stop myself there, but I do want to add just a little bit of glitter. So I'm going to take some Stardust stickles and just add a tiny bit around the edge of these white centers of all of the flowers. I didn't want to add it over the entire center since there are those little dot details in them. I didn't want to cover that up completely, so I just added a little bit there so that'll catch in the light when you lift it. So I'll show you how that looks right now. And that is going to finish off this card. There's another peek at the inside. If you're a fan of these all dies cards, be sure to hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Make sure you're subscribed and have your notification bell turned on. And if you'd like to watch this again, you'll find it today over on the Lawn Fawn YouTube channel as well. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.